Hello, welcome to the Museum of Progress at Heritage Farm. My name is Audy Perry, and we are going to be exploring the progress of our ancestors, especially those here in Appalachia, using three kitchens, one from the year 1850, one from the year 1900, and then another one from 1925 to show how we have progressed. What is progress? You know, at school, every 6 to 8 weeks, you get a progress report. A report card is probably what you call it. And it is it's a check on how are you progressing, how are you developing, how are you getting towards your goals. And so we're going to be looking at that for especially us in Appalachia. Now, I've used that term a couple of times. Appalachia is one of the oldest regions of this nation. It is named after the Appalachian Mountains, which stretch from a portion of New York State all the way down through a portion of Mississippi. And a total of 13 states are touched by the Appalachian region. But West Virginia is the only state entirely encapsulated within Appalachia. Well, let's begin. First kitchen here you're looking at is representative of what a house would have looked like in this particular area. Heritage Farm is located in Huntington, West Virginia, which is the westernmost portion of West Virginia. And in 1850, this is what a house would have looked like. Now, a lot of times Appalachia doesn't get the best of descriptions by history. And one of the explanations is by looking at this. See, in 1750, even 100 years or more earlier, the people on the East Coast had much fancier structures than we had with our log homes here in central Appalachia. Faneuil Hall in Boston or the Governor's Palace in Williamsburg, these were beautiful structures. So when the East Coast people finally made it over the mountains and discovered us living like this, they committed a suicide. Don't look it up, I just made it up. They assumed because we had less, that we were worth less creative, less intelligent. But that's certainly not true. In fact, if you pay attention, these people, our ancestors, were some of the most creative, entrepreneurial people the planet's ever seen. Because see the difference, everything you're looking at, they had to figure out how to make themselves. As opposed to people who lived on the East Coast who could simply order it from the boat from Europe, or they lived in communities, so if they wanted a wool coat, for instance, they could go to the farmer to purchase the fleece and then take it to the tailor to have a coat made. As opposed to this man and woman who chose to come over the mountains and live here in Appalachia, they had, just to have that same wool coat, what did they have to do? First of all, they had to raise the sheep, and then shear the sheep, then cart the wool, dye the wool, spin the wool, and in all of their spare time, make that coat. So incredible ingenuity and problem-solving skills with our ancestors. And so that's one of the things we're going to celebrate in this conversation about progress is it is a story of problem-solving. Your ancestors were amazing problem solvers, and that's something we want to tap into together because that is our way forward to make a better and brighter tomorrow is using those problem solving skills that we inherited from our ancestors. Now, this tour can be given many different ways, and each time you come to Heritage Farm, you'll probably be given a new way to see these three kitchens. But I'm going to focus on a couple of those just to give you a taste. Some people could go through each one of these and talk about each one of these handmade items. I'll give you for instance. What do you think? This is a broom, a handmade broom. Now, you and I probably today, we just go to Walmart and maybe spend $10 on a broom. But they couldn't do that, remember? They had to make everything themselves. This broom was one piece of wood. They have hand carved all of this down to here. So all of this wood, each strand, used to be part of a larger piece of wood up here. Wow. And you know, a lot of times people think rural is about bare minimum, but it's not. It's just the way in which they show beauty and creativity is different based upon what they had available. You see the little notches on there? I don't know if that was the fella, that was his mark, or he was showing his wife that he loved her, or my guess is how many cotton blooming days it took to make this broom. It was a lot of work just to have a broom, something that we take totally for granted. And our ancestors were very resourceful. So finally, when they did get a crop in the ground, we have the original Swiffer, Broom 2.0. They used those corn stalks, those husks, to make the next type of broom. Very ingenious. So why was Appalachia so rural like this? Why was it so late to be settled? It is because of that dense forest. The forest here was so thick that they had to survive their first winter here without growing a garden. Their first summer was simply spent bringing down trees enough and then removing the roots so that the sun could get in so they could have a garden. So surviving that first winter was brutal. And then they were able to usually find settlement along a creek or river because that was where there was already sunlight coming in. So hardworking, ingenious people. Now, a different way to give this tour is just to focus on anybody, not just Appalachia, but anybody in 1850. You know what? Relevant to the power sources that we use, life hadn't changed at all. It's no different in 1850 as it had been since Moses was alive, right? Thousands and thousands of years, they lived the exact same way. They were cooking over the open flame to heat their food. They were going outside to get their water. And they were using candles to see after dark. Thousands and thousands and thousands of years of human history, and there had been no change in the power sources that we use. So that brings us to this next conversation about progress. So as we journey down this way, we're going to be talking about how life progressed between 1850 and 1900. One of the largest expansions of human creativity and ingenuity in the history of man. Just that 50-year period. So now we're looking at what a kitchen would have looked like in 1900. Again, thousands and thousands of years of virtually no change in the power sources we use. And now in just 50 years, look what happened. We have kerosene that replaced the candle. We have, we're still burning wood to cook our food, but it's now in a cast iron stove. We still are bringing water from the outside, but now it can be pumped into our house. And many other of these inventions because of yesteryear's Amazon.com, the Sears catalog. You could have anything anybody had anywhere. You could have it brought to you, or you could purchase it in a community. And so you didn't have to make everything yourself. You could purchase a Singer sewing machine. You could purchase a Edison phonograph, world's first iPod up there, right? A Western electric telephone. All of these products were now available. And that was incredible. Imagine growing up in that 1850s home and then owning this home as an adult. You couldn't imagine anything being any better. In fact, the gentleman in charge of the U.S. Patent Office in the year 1901, in his report to Congress, said that they could begin closing up his office because everything that could be invented had been done. Now, we chuckle at that because we know better, but you can understand where he was coming from. So what we want to do is remind ourselves what happened. Why thousands of years of virtually no progress and then incredible change in just 50 years? Well, that 50-year period is called the Industrial Revolution. And unfortunately, a lot of times we just give some credit to a few inventors, a few politicians, and we move on. But if we do, we really miss a huge opportunity to discover what is important about the human race. And that is, what was the difference between thousands of years of virtually no change and then what happened in that 50-year period? Well, one of the biggest things that happened was education. And I know all of you there in school are now going, oh, here we go, right? But think about it. Prior to 1850, the only people that got educated were usually the king's family or the ultra-wealthy. The rest of us were destined for involuntary servitude because we weren't equipped with the things that make progress possible. Reading, the ability to read, the ability to write, the ability to do math, right? Those things are the tools which make our brains come alive, and we are naturally creative creatures. When we are given the opportunity with those tools, this is what happens. And so in America, they started dotting the countryside with those little one-room schoolhouses and made education open to the public. And when they did, this is the example of what happens with that ingenuity, that problem-solving skills that is innate to each of us, but then when it's leveraged up with the ability to think, this is the result. So now let's walk forward and see how this goes as we progress in half that time. Thousands of years of no change, and then just 50 years, incredible change. Now we're at 1925. So in half that time, in just 25 years, incredible change happened again. Again, as more and more people became educated, greater and greater changes happened more quickly. The biggest change, obviously, was electricity. Electricity changed everything. All these power sources, the things you're seeing here existed in the prior two kitchens, but now that they got a new power source, they were reinvented. And now we had other power sources, gasoline stoves instead of wood burning. We have the ability to get hot and cold water with our hot water tank, which was gas powered. Washing machines and radios and telephones and all these amazing things, again, were available through your Sears catalog. I think the greatest, other than electricity, the single biggest invention that changed our economy the most was this right here. What do you think it is? It's a refrigerator. A refrigerator, this is the motor. It was electric. And inside, now you could begin to preserve food. And that was the primary problem to be solved for our ancestors. If you think about it, in 1850, 97% of the United States population was involved in food production. Today, in 2020, here in America, that's less than 3% of our population's jobs. So we've had a total reversal of what we do. In 1850, your whole life was basically about food because we like to have food to eat. We must have food to eat. But food used to go bad. And so the only way to make it last longer than just the day or two you had it was to either dry it or to smoke it out. Nothing really lasts very long. So when the electricity came along and replaced the icebox with a refrigerator, then food could last much longer, giving us more free time to have other jobs. And so many industries blossomed because we had more free time beyond just making food for ourselves. Now, I want to take a spot here to talk about something fun that we like to do here at Farm. It's called 3 levels of thought. And you can do this with anything at your house. You can do this with things you see here at the museum, other places on this website. The Dig Deeper site might be a fun way to do this. But you can take anything in the past and take these 3 steps. Step 1, identify something from the past. What do you think it is? This is a toaster from 1925, an electric toaster. It plugged right into the wall. So that's level 1. Level 2, what could you do to make this toaster better? Some examples are, you could double it, so you could do twice as many. You could put something on the side so you don't get burned. Right? Let me ask you, why am I having to do this? Well, my favorite, I had an answer by a 4th grader, which I really loved. He said, Mr. Perry, it needs 2 more Bernie things. I love that answer. Yes, it only had 1 set of coils to heat the bread. So you had to turn the bread so it could toast both sides. And so he was saying, if you had 2 more set of coils, it could toast both sides the same time. I was like, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. But why wouldn't this, I mean, clearly this person was ingenious. They invented a toaster, but why would he or she only have thought to toast one side at a time? Well, it's because that's what it looked like. That's what they were used to. You know, boys and girls, there's been a toaster ever since the Iron Age. Moses probably had a toaster. I'll show you what one looked like. A toaster from the Iron Age for thousands and thousands of years was simply 2 pieces of iron, and it swiveled. So you would set it next to the fire, and the fire would heat that one, and you'd put your bread down in these slats, and it would heat that one side of the bread. And then you turn it so the other side could toast. Now, this is iron, and this would be a huge fire. So you wouldn't reach down here with your hand because you'd get burned. So you turn it with your toe. It's a toaster. What do you think of that, boys and girls? That's where that word comes from, a toaster. But that's a great example of how we can use our brains to make new things, because a lot of times when you're asked to invent something or create or imagine what could be better, our brain goes to something that seems impossible, like, you know, what replaces electricity, or putting a man on the moon, or the Mars, or all that kind of thing. And that'd be wonderful. I hope you figure those kind of things out anew and again. But many times, it's just a simple derivation of what already existed. The gentleman took that thought and he just applied the new power source. So that's why he was still turning the toast. But then level 3 is really where I want you to focus. Level 3 is, what could your toaster at your house today in 2000, what could you have done today to make, what could your toaster have done this morning to make your day better? How could you improve today's toaster, the one at your house today? You might say, well, a different power source. Cool. You might say could do more than just toast. Waffles. When I do that with children here, and you tell them, don't be embarrassed to tell your ideas. Your ideas have value. A lot of times we're uncomfortable in sharing our ideas because we're afraid somebody's going to make fun of us. Boys and girls, everybody find something in this that somebody invented. Just point to it. Pick it out. Call it out. I guarantee you the person who made that got made fun of. Because unfortunately, that's something that humans do. When they don't understand something, they make fun of it. But every person in here persevered. They overcame that fear of other people and changed the world in the way that they could with what was in their brain. And I want you to encourage you to do the same. Everything in your world can be improved upon. Think about a problem that you want to solve. You know, a lot of people will ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's a hard question. It takes a long time to figure out. I'll tell you a good way to figure out how to get there. Instead, why don't you figure out a problem that you want to solve, that you're passionate about, and then the job will find you. Because the world will always need people who can problem solve, who can think critically about the world around them and how to appropriately analyze and evaluate and make things. If you can do one or more of those things in every class or subject matter that they give you at school, you're going to be way ahead of everybody else out there. So, boys and girls, Appalachian up. It's going to be great. I want to see you here and tell me your great ideas that you came up with. See you soon.